Listening to you, good, okay. So I'll just call the inaugural accessibility, oh, yes, great. There he is.
Hi.
You're not late, it's fine. Thanks for coming. Got a spot for you right here.
Very much.
There. I'll open that one if you want to.
Sure. Well, this one works better to get a circulation of air going, to keep the amount of CO2 down so that we're not breathing so much of each other's air. That's why I have this one open. But these, yeah. Well, there's a nice one there. You prefer that?
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
Okay. Okay. This is like old times. Peter and I were on the OCP steering committee a long time ago. Okay. Got another 10.
Okay, so first meeting of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I'm Steph Short, I'm the committee coordinator. I'm going to start us off and then we'll do introductions and a couple of initial topics before we get to elections. So why don't we start with introductions? Take your time. Tina, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Tina Nielsen. I'm Chief Librarian at the Bowen Island Library.
Thank you.
I'm Janet Ross, and I'm here as a representative of Sky Seniors Group here on Bowen.
Thank you.
I'm Daniel Martin. I'm the manager of planning and development with the municipality.
I'm Drew Becken. I'm the island community planner with the municipality planning department.
I'm Peter Williamson. I live in Evergreen, just moved there last week. I'm retired basically. I can't work, and I'm been on a few committees, as Sue-Ann mentioned. I'm looking forward to being on this one.
I might add that he's also one of the champion spellers from the library spelling bee. I was lucky enough to be on this team. I'm Sue Ellen Fast, and I was members of lots of committees. I'm now on council and an Islands Trust trustee and on the library board, and I'm delighted to be here.
My name is Angus McTavish. I grew up on Bowen. I attended Bix and Westvan Secondary. I was a library volunteer on Bowen for several years. I work on Bowen and on the North Shore. I'm involved in Special Olympics swimming and BC sailing. I'm looking forward to serving on the municipal accessibility.
Thanks.
I'm Robin Berger, also known as Angus's mom. We've lived on Bowen for over 30 years. I retired from the Vancouver School Board, special education. I did a master's degree in community psychology. Angus and I have been involved in the disability community for many years, and we both participate in ability sailing together. And I've been a long-time housing advocate and volunteer on Bowen, and my master's thesis was on housing policy. I look forward to serving on this committee.
And I'm Kathy Pecora Fuller, actually. We should probably put my official name, but Kathy Fuller is easy. And we actually bought our property on Bowen in the 90s and had this as our retirement plan. We finally built a house in 2017, and I retired from the University of Toronto in 2020, right when COVID started. So I've been living here during COVID, and now I get to get out. So clinically, I am trained as an audiologist, and my PhD is in cognitive psychology, and I look at sensory and cognitive aging. And I was on the UBC accessibility committee for when I was at UBC and also at U of T. So right now, that's great to actually do something about accessibility instead of just doing research. And communication and aging are the things that I have the most experience in.
Wonderful, thank you. We also have Councillor Jurgensen, who is a council member on this committee, who is not well, and he's from the Canadian Organization of Blind and Deafblind, along with Jessica Gladys, who represents the same organization, who's also sick. Thanks. The agenda today is just a few orientation and getting up to speed on what's been done so far, elections, and then a review of information we have and next steps. Is there anything anyone wants to add to the agenda before we get started? Councillor?
Partly because we've got a couple of planners with us today, I'd like to just add design guidelines for Snug Cove.
Okay.
And just to mention them, like, do we want to talk about something? And our transportation plan.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing is just conditions at this meeting. Like, should I close this door? Should I turn off some lights? Anything like that.
Okay, we'll have that at the end, maybe 6.3, then we can do plans for 6.2 and general for 6.3. Can I get a mover to move the agenda, please? Seconder, Peter, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. So I was just going to do a brief orientation of committees in general. Council has asked that this be improved for committee members so that people are more familiar with how committees work. This is going to be a working group. You guys need to write a plan. And so it's not just advisory like some of the groups are. What I'm putting on the screen is our quick guide for reference guide for committee members. So for agendas, I normally gather material about a week before the meeting, and then I publish 5 days before. That'll come in your inbox and be posted on the website. There's sometimes a ton of information linked and sometimes nothing but topics. The chair works with me to decide what's going to be on that, but you can let the chair and myself know if you want something included. Any questions on agendas? Minutes are high level, decision points, action items. If something's really controversial, we might include it, but generally it's not stenography. It's just sort of a record of what happened. Those are sent to council after chair approval and posted on the website after they're adopted. Any questions on minutes? Quorum is 50+1.
How many are we, Steph? Is this all of us?
Plus Alex and Jessica. And you and Alex are voting, and Daniel and Drew are not. Oops, no, one of you are. One of you are voting. I love resolutions and recommendations. It's great to vote on things and make sure we get all the information in a spot where then we can track it later. So there's an internal resolution we vote on, decisions that we're able to make. And then if we want big things done by council, you make a recommendation to council and vote on it. Okay. Action items, committee members can't direct staff. That's where the recommendations come to council. So we can action each other, but we can't action Drew and Daniel. Or Tina, really, I guess, or me, really. Just a friendly reminder. Subcommittees can be members of the group and it can be members outside in the community. So if someone's getting excited about a project that involves expertise, ideology or ramps or any other library-oriented project, but just bring your notes back to the committee so it comes back on our agenda. Report back in. Most things are public unless it's a closed meeting, which I don't know we'll be doing much of with this group. The email address when you received the email, the agenda was AAC@bimbc.ca. Everyone in this room, including myself, is on that email address. It's a great way to communicate, and that's how members of the public will, which is going to be a big one for this group, is people being able to make suggestions and express concerns. praise you. I'm going to ask if you please don't reply. Staff will figure out what the appropriate reply is. It's usually going to be the chair replying, but I will usually acknowledge receipt. And then if it's something so operational, ask staff to reply, or the chair can give a fulsome reply. Yeah, Councillor.
Or if somebody writes like a letter to this committee, then do we have a place on the agenda for correspondence?
So basically, the policy we have for correspondence is if it's something we're going to be talking about, which with accessibility is probably going to be, then we'll put it on the agenda. If it's something that, I'm going to give you a different committee for an example. If like say Parks and Trails, if someone's talking about a trail, but it's not an agenda item, then we'd recommend if you want it in public, send it to council, because council is the central body. So that's where public should go. So it'll only be published if we're going to be discussing it.
Right, and then council could always, Alex or I could always say at a council meeting, let's refer this to the committee.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Communications, yeah, just, again, this is such a nice group, but you know, if you have a strong opinion about something on Facebook, that's you. It's not you, comma, the committee, right? Just be careful with social media.
Say, speaking personally?
Yeah, okay, exactly, yeah. That's my brief overview. Does anyone have questions about how things work? You know all this.
Just to acknowledge that if there's a person with a disability participating, we would need to ask their consent in order to, if they're partaking with personal information of their disability.
Okay.
Just that's sort of an acknowledgement at the beginning of a meeting, perhaps.
Okay, so the cameras are on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, for example, you know, I can say, Angus, you give consent to, you know, give personal information in the meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
That's pretty much it.
okay. Make a note of that. Yes, Councillor?
That's great. And also, we can close a meeting if, for example, some issue comes up where people are going, whoa, I think this is a privacy issue. We can like take a quick break,
Okay,
communicate with Steph, either close the meeting or refer it to staff to see what they should do or whatever. But I agree with you, privacy and consent are important. It could also be like if somebody's got a complaint about a business or somebody's personal business and somebody says, I want to talk about, well, maybe just have a word with Steph and the chair or Steph or whatever you say, Steph, beforehand to say, because as a municipality, we're bound by rules about not singling people out or talking about them when they don't have a chance to respond, and just privacy stuff. So just flag.
So what's the procedure if somebody with a disability has an accessibility request so that they can participate in the meeting? So if we had somebody with a hearing loss, you know, could they sit out there? Could they tell you in advance, you know, here's my equipment, you know, and plan that?
that is this group's job, is exactly what we're doing, is identifying those procedures.
Well, maybe that's a good place to start, that these
Okay.
meetings actually, you know, if there is information for the public about attending the meeting, then, you know, some messaging about let us know if you have accessibility issues.
Okay.
And I don't know, this is going out on YouTube, is it being like captioned automatically? Are all of the meetings captioned automatically? Or is that
Would
an
I-
option people would have if they were viewing? Anyway, things like
Yeah.
that, it's kind of, once they have to get into the room first, virtual or physical, and then it's a matter of what the content is.
usually you could, at that point, discuss accommodations. Right? So requirements or things that someone might need to participate.
I feel like we're just getting right into the meat of everything.
We're raring to go.
Yeah, okay, so I kind of want to get off the chair, so if we could just get out of my,
Thoughts?
yeah, thank you. I put, then just, that's all, just basic committee procedures. Just the overview, Sue Ellen, about the provincial, do you feel, it was Alex was going to do this, do you want me to? Okay, so just, we've set up a web page, which is the committee web page. So I'll stop to share. So when you go to our website, I've asked to make it more accessible, that we put a button at the front of the homepage saying the accessibility committee, which is where information will be housed for now. So this is just our generic committee web page. And then we've got this.
So you're on the APC.
Where did that go? Thank you. I'm also suffering from visual accessibility, disability issue, by the way. So here it has the AAC. Oh, it's still not here though. There's a form we put in today. Anyways, so we'll be loading information onto this page and including the terms of reference. That's just what we've done. And then moving on to the provincial legislation, there were 3 pieces required by the province. One was to have ongoing feedback available. One was to form a committee and one was to write a plan. So I did send you a document showing, I think it's 7 different options for feedback. Those are ongoing. And those will be channeled to this group with confidentiality considered. If you want to add to that list, that's welcome. This is the committee that's been formed, and next step is to write the plan. Done. I don't want any questions. Oh, no, yes?
So is this the plan that had a deadline of September 1st?
September 1st, yes, thank you, yes. Any more questions?
September
I'm glad
1st,
you got to
2023.
say that.
2023, yes, Counselor.
In defense of staff, I'm also on the Islands Trust Council, which is another rural group that, doesn't meet much over the summer. And they also are just getting organized. I think there's many municipalities and groups that are. So, yeah.
And almost every public library is in the same position. Nobody's meeting September 1st as a deadline, nor have we been told that anyone's going to come and wrap our knuckles for not meeting the September 1st deadline.
What a nice group. I think TransLink is done. And we have also, but we've done the survey. We did that huge, massive survey and the community sessions. And we've done some work.
Yeah.
A team.
Yes.
I'd like to call an election. Would anyone like to nominate anyone for chair?
You're doing such a great job, Steph.
Counselor would like to nominate.
I would like to nominate Kathy Palmer. Did you say?
Pecora.
Pecora. Kathy Pecora Fuller.
Yeah.
Can I get is there a second nomination? Anybody?
I'll just speak to it a little bit. I remember Kathy from the workshop that we did. And from what I gather, you've got the kind of background that would be able to run a good meeting and get us off and running and accomplish the work that council is expecting us to do. So I think it would be great if you would be the chair.
Does anyone agree with Counselor Fast?
Oh, yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Second that, yeah.
Yes? Okay, that's 3 nominations. That's 3 calls, right? Okay, mover, please. Mover, seconder? Seconder, all in favor? All opposed? Any opposed? Okay, next one.
I'll just
Thank you.
say, I've
Speech.
run a lot of meetings. So that part I'm not worried about. But you guys all know more about Bowen than I do. So this is how you're gonna teach me about Bowen as we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Does anyone nominate for a vice chair?
I do actually, but first I just want to say thank you, Kathy, for taking this on, because to be a chair of an advisory committee like this is a bunch of work, including meeting deadlines to get the agenda going and talking to people and working with staff and all that. And it's sometimes administrative work that people don't want to take on, so I appreciate that. And I have a nomination for vice chair too. I would like to nominate Robin.
Anyone else like to nominate themselves or anybody else or Robin? Angus, yes, for Robin?
Or for you.
Do you have to have 3 different people
I think, yeah.
nominate? I think you just call for nominations 3 times.
Okay, I don't know.
You just
I want to get off the
Just
chair.
call for nominations 3 times, and as
Okay.
long as no one else is offering a different nomination,
Okay.
then you are basically, you don't even need to vote because it's by acclamation, if there's only one
Oh.
candidate.
Makes it easier.
So you just have to say, are there further nominations for the position of vice chair? You have to say that twice after the initial nomination.
Are there further nominations for the position of vice chair? Are there further nominations for the position of vice chair?
I'll have to do it.
By acclamation, Robin Berger? I want my gavel.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both, Kathy and Robin, for taking those roles.
Now, you know all the background, I don't, but, all right. So we have left off at 4.3 with this plan, which is still a bit mysterious to us. Me anyway, what that looks like and when it's due. So that is our new business, is the accessibility planning. But actually, I don't, now that I'm looking at this, I don't see where are we going to get to any planning. So we have the survey results and the community session notes. That's what I'm looking at. So somehow we have to start discussing a plan. So shall we just start with what we know so
Kind of what
far?
we're doing at the beginning, I think. So that's we've got the survey with 130 people filled in the survey. And those results are there. And the community session we had in June, that's the lodge. Some great notes came from that. And that's sort of how far we've come. So this group needs to take us to the next step. I did send by email a workbook provided by the province, which is sort of some starting points. That's in the email. I can print them for you if you'd like. I just didn't want to print out 1,000 pages if you don't want them. Some ideas there for ways to get started. And I also sent you this,
That was from today's email.
that's from today's, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So, yeah.
All right. So do we want to say anything about the survey results? Do people look at them? Any comments about them?
Yeah, the results were pretty interesting. Looked like most represented was seniors. Less visible. Just kind of raw data there.
Anybody else have any, like what did we learn from those survey results? Anybody else have any observations? Peter?
I haven't seen the survey results.
Those were, that's part of the orientation. Those are linked to the agenda.
Was it in there? Okay, I'm
1A.
sorry.
It's okay. That's why I kind of wanted to review that there's stuff in that agenda that's 100 pages long.
And are those documents available to the public too?
Yes.
Okay. So, just in case anybody wants to know, it is an interesting document. I found it quite fascinating. So it's quite a long document. There's over 100 pages. But it's actually exactly what every individual responded to the questions. So you get the raw data. And So, you know, that observation of Robin, that there's a lot of content about seniors. That's the kind of thing I was thinking when I was reading it, but if anybody else has anything to say. So it kind of looks to me, you know, even though it was possibly a small sample, I don't know what kind of sample you would expect, but I thought it gave a good range of results. And there were some comments that were kind of definitely about aging, and some people who were already older, who already had some issues, and also some people who were saying, I don't have any problems now, but I think I might in the future. So they were happy to plan ahead and could see this being relevant to them in the future. There were also a lot of comments about that you could kind of slice it according to the context. So a lot of comments about beach access and trail access, and transportation was a huge topic. Yeah.
Housing, I think, was on there.
So, you know, I'm a scientist, I'm sorry, but.
You've already analyzed the data.
So, well, I haven't. I have resisted analyzing it, but I'm happy to do that. And I'm interested in your comments, or if there's a way you think it would be useful. But I think we could kind of, some people talked about hearing loss, some people talked about wheelchair access, you know, so there's different age groups, there's different specific ability issues, and there's different, you know, everyday life settings that kind of make sense to me. Is there, you guys had there was a glimmer in your face. Was there something you were thinking about how would we kind of organize this plan? Taking on from the survey results, was there, did I see a glimmer?
Yeah, I think I saw, when I looked at it, I saw lots of stuff you talk about in terms of like trail access, beach access, cove access, like lots of comments specific to cove, like businesses in the cove, and just like infrastructure, like, you know, sidewalks, lighting, stairs, ramps, whatever else, just accessibility, like access to things in the cove. I saw that, and then, things in the cove, and then trails and beaches.
Can we just be clear that I'm taking that the only things that we can really address here are municipal property, municipal facilities, and things that the municipality controls.
Well, that was a question I had too. So people spoke about a wide range of topics, and maybe, I don't know, Stephanie, or if you can clarify this, but I think it's good that people had voiced some concerns, but some of the concerns might involve other parties who are responsible, you know. So if there's some suggestions about that might be directed to BC Ferries, I guess the municipality could speak on behalf of people who have raised issues, but you couldn't actually tell BC Ferries what to do.
But as a liaising body, as a communications and information sharing source, we can make recommendations.
I think the plan could be, the focus is, it talks about, you know, assist the municipality and the library identifying barriers, interacting with those organizations. But then I think it can speak to the bit larger community. So be it like, you know, if it's for the municipality to advocate for businesses or like assist businesses to provide, you know, ways to solve barriers that are identified, I think that has a role. I think there could be a role that it's like we have, for example, Sue Ellen mentioned, we have design guidelines in Stone Cove. Well, some of those can actually reference, like, you know, when we see a new building or new development, these are things that we want to see, whatever standard there may be. Or it might be that the plan is for the municipality and council to advocate to BC Ferries, because you're right, we can't make BC Ferries do it, but the plan could speak to, you know, action council should take to
Cooperate, collaborate with other people who might have the responsibility.
Yeah.
Does that answer your, get there? And the trails too, there were a lot of comments about trails, but some of those trails are metro parks. Is that who's
Yes, some
responsible
might be,
for them?
if they're in Crippen, they'd be metro trails, and some are probably, like a lot of the beach ones that I saw referenced were, those are all municipal.
So the municipality could be the implementer of actions, but some it could again be this communication action. And what I also saw in there was, some things you would need physical environment changes, like better sidewalks that are smooth.
Yeah.
But there's also changes which are more social in terms of people's attitudes and being helpful, and that is, not something you can educate, but you can't legislate that people are friendly. And that they're informed. So I'm kind of thinking that was a big part of our discussion in the summer, was the social, actually the strength of Bowen being more the social support. And so it sounds like there's something to do about everything that was said. Possibly, but it could be action, it could be information, it could be advocacy. We divide it like that. I'm kind of imagining some kind of a little chart where there's a some organization of things to be looked at, and then what is the type of action that could be proposed. The other thing, maybe you can clarify, maybe it's in this act, which I haven't looked at, the workbook, but to me, I like IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility. And to me, accessibility is more tuned to disability. Whereas, the inclusion, diversity, equity part may be more tuned to some of the race and gender and some of the other issues, age, that came up in some of the comments. And it kind of, I can understand why people made those comments, that they may feel they're not welcome and therefore things are not accessible to them. But I'm thinking if the reasons for that are not based on disability, is that within our scope or not?
Can I just clarify something as well off the top? Was it the idea that we were to come up with a plan for the library in terms of legislation around accessibility, for a plan for the library in particular first, and then a broader plan for accessibility for the municipality?
No,
Okay.
for the municipality overall, and the library is a municipal library, so we're falling under we'll work together with the municipality. Okay, the same plan?
Right. I just wondered about the connection,
Yeah.
So it's an overall accessibility plan. And is some of that laid out in the act, isn't it? In terms of themes, like Kathy's talking about? So for libraries, for example.
Yeah, there's quite a few libraries that are creating their own.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
there's
what I-
others who are working with their city
Right,
or municipality. Sort of depends on the size. So for the library to do this on our own means we would have to replicate this committee. So
Got it.
finding another 5 or 8 people willing to sit on a separate other committee to do the same work seemed like not highly, we were gonna have a challenge to try and do that. So in terms of
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
sorry, Sue Ellen, you were gonna speak and I'm.
No, I was going to say, it would be the same people. This all makes a lot of sense. I do have my hand up, but I can wait.
But I kind of followed the answer. So
I have one other thing I'd like to bring up that might help. Sure. There's a document that's put out by Disability Alliance of BC, DABC, called Developing Your First Accessibility Plan.
Yeah.
And it has a
I'm in it right
template
now.
and the guidelines and the steps you could go through and what the plan might have in it. That might be a way for us to start with the very first plan, use a template that kind of already exists, created by a Disability Alliance, so that we're not starting from scratch and recreating the wheel.
Perfect.
And I'm happy to,
This is it.
yeah, okay.
Like these, I think these are the types you were talking about as a built environment and service delivery, education.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
I think
very
that would
good sense.
help us a lot to focus about how to create.
Various organizations related to ability or diverse abilities that put out exactly
Yeah,
similar guidelines or standards.
yeah,
So
because I think,
yes, you know.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm interested in this idea about how plans fit together and what the scope of our work is. And I went and looked in our official community plan for all of Bowen Island, which is not just about the municipality, it's about the community, created by the community. So there's individuals and businesses and everybody in it. And I just wanted to flag if it's got accessibility all through it. For example, ensure that all buildings have universal access and accessible parking spaces are designated as per the requirements. You know, that's policy 184. And there's a big objective 97 here is to ensure that sufficient space is reserved within Snugco Village so that a range of core community recreation, social, cultural, can be accessible to all members of the community and meet present and future demands. So I always see the OCP as the big umbrella, and then these plans of various kinds are underneath. Plus they all mix together, like the transportation plan has universal access built in. And so does, at least one of our other plans that I was thinking of a minute ago. Beach parks and things. So transportation especially. So anyway, I just wanted to say we're kind of wide open to think about what's best for Bowen. And we don't need to constrain ourselves to one department kind of thing or another.
So what was the document you were just referring to? Just,
This one is the official community plan for Bowen Island.
is that in our set of stuff that we're?
Not yet, I can send that.
Okay, that would be good. That would be good. Well, that
So
is.
much, so. Yeah.
I know, and this is part of the puzzle is that, this committee kind of has to be a lens through which all the other committees see the world.
And many of the committees even have that in their plans, not even the committees, but the plans that have been adopted by council, like our transportation plan has the universal access in there as well. Partly because probably it's in the OCP, it's the right thing to do. The OCP is the big umbrella. Lots of things I always look to it first to find out what can I hang my plans on. And anyway, Snugco guidelines, all those things are under there.
So I'm,
Sorry,
Go ahead.
other municipalities have also adopted their own accessibility plans or are in phases of doing so since this legislation came about a year or two ago. So I mean, that's a research resource as well. May not necessarily be applicable to Bowen, but it does work.
Yeah, that's her motto. I shared the Whistler one with you. It's
Reinvent the wheel.
yeah.
Peter?
I noticed on that list that was projected up there was, there's a reference to employment. Is that really something that this committee would do? Because I would have thought there's other kinds of legislation that governs accessibility and equity within employment.
It says the accessibility plan could draw from these 8 areas.
Right.
Well, I imagine one matter is employees who work for the municipality as opposed to employment in general. But some of the comments related to employment, so I guess we can set priorities in this plan too. So that may not be first priority.
Right.
And what does that mean? I think probably you can use the survey and the discussions to see, you know, did people have things to say about that?
I think it came up in the survey in terms of responses.
Yeah,
If you have a more invisible disability, it's harder to find employment on one. That can be an issue. I don't know how, like you say, priority-wise, whether employment would.
and it could just kind of work into the advocacy. And transportation, there were like, how would you get to your job if you didn't have transportation? So that all these things are connected. So I am thinking, based on the survey, so I'm 6.1, based on the survey and the community sessions, we could all of us go through there and, you know, what is it saying to us in terms of what people came up with? But then we got to cross-reference it to these documents. And maybe there is a kind of a first, now you can tell me the right word, is this a resolution? You know, kind of that, you know, in principle, anything, you know, should be seen through the lens of accessibility. And some of what people were reporting in the comments, it's like, well, it's fine to say everything should have universal design. That's a principle, but it isn't a detail. So how do you actually do it? You know, but the first thing, I guess, is the motherhood and apple pie. That the accessibility lens can be applied to anything that happens on Bowen. So would that be a resolution that we can kind of?
Sounds like a guiding statement for the document.
Yeah, I think so, that it could be like it's just repeating probably what's been said already, but just to kind of make it clear to people that anything anybody does on Bowen could have this accessibility lens.
I think that's what on that for a resolution. It's a little unusual, but I think it's great.
It's kind of conceptual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I move
Yes.
that the chair's statement as a guiding principle for the draft plan be adopted.
That the guiding principle for the draft plan.
That the accessibility lens be applied, you know, to any
Activity or change?
Help her.
Social,
Pardon me.
I think of it as an overall social umbrella that affects so many different aspects of life, but there are also, there's so much overlap, such as transportation, which is, I feel for instance, seniors, transportation is abysmal on Bowen, and accessibility is a huge issue with transportation, but that seems to be kind of separated from some of the other so-called accessibility issues.
Could it be linked to other social policy?
Well, let's just maybe back up to this kind of high altitude thing that we want to, that the committee wishes to apply an accessibility lens to all aspects of life on Bowen.
That works.
That's very general. And then the specific ways in which topics where that would apply, we can identify. And then I imagine there's a more detailed level about, and then how exactly would you make changes?
So if I may, Chair, then my motion would be that the chair's statement be adopted as a preliminary focus of Bowen's accessibility plan or draft accessibility plan, something. Guiding principle?
Yeah, okay, so if I say the chair statement, so what about that the Accessibility Advisory Committee resolve that the guiding principle for the draft accessibility plan be that an accessibility lens be applied to all aspects of life on Bowen Island?
Nice.
Yeah, just to get us started.
Yep, that's what I meant. Yeah. I move that.
Okay, seconder. Let's do Angus.
Discussion?
Discussion.
Can I speak to my motion? Through the chair, I think this is a great way to start by this committee just putting their heads together at this early stage and agreeing on a principle that we will use to focus our work. And I think the chair has stated it well, and it's a something to get us going that we can report as well to others to say, yeah, we're getting going. And I'm just seeing nodding around the table. And so that's why I'll be voting in favor of this motion.
Okay, any other comments? Shall we vote? All in favor?
One of you two.
Right. One of you two. All right.
And the
Okay.
chair gets to vote too.
Okay, I get to vote.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, that passed unanimously, I think.
So we have kind of the concept, and then like how do we organize the work is the next step. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring up that I've been thinking about this for years. So I've got ideas written down. I'm not sure when to bring them forward and resources and things like that. I'm happy to hang on to them until the topic comes up from the group. I don't want to push things, but I've got ideas for trails and beaches and things that are in the Bowen land use bylaw, and things like that, that we could potentially use. So it's not that that I have a way to go forward right from here, but I've been collecting ideas and probably others have. And so when we're closer to a framework, I'm happy to bring them forward. Is that what you'd like? Or I can trot some out right now.
Well, I think, you know, this agenda, basically we have, you know, discussing the survey results in the community session, and then we just have other business. So we have the time, I think, to talk a little bit about this, but I'm feeling like what you said before about the topics of the plan, that rather than dive into details, you know, if, you know, every life on Bowen should be accessible. How do we break that down? So the list that Steph had on the screen, maybe you could put that.
Sure, and that is included in the document that Tina has sent to you,
Yeah,
which also holds the framework. So that'll be a good document to use.
I was going to volunteer for an action item. Would you want that?
which was the, what's the name of the document again?
Developing your first accessibility plan. It would have come from Tina just a few minutes ago.
Just sent that. The other one was the Accessible BC Act workbook. Is that the one you were thinking of?
Yeah, so this.
That's one Steph sent earlier.
Yeah. I don't think these are quite the right divisions to get us started. And this is the workbook. Does it have a, what I'm looking for is how do we break this down? So this kind of has, oh,
sorry.
God. Can you work when it's up? That's the problem.
Yeah, it's okay.
So built environment, we could work with communication, transportation. Some of these we could work with. But there's another way of dividing the work and conquering.
Do you have your hand up, Peter?
I think I'd like to suggest that rather than worrying about how we divide it now, let's jump into some nitty-gritty and talk about things. And I think, kick some ideas around. And I think as we do that, we'll say, oh, right, okay, this transportation seems to be a thing that's coming up as important. I don't think we need, or nor would I be particularly in favor of saying, well, here we've got 9 different areas that we wanted to do and address them one by one. I'd be in favor of jumping to the nitty-gritty, as Sue Ellen mentioned, that she had some ideas already, and letting things just go a little more freely for a while.
I'm interested in whatever the end product might be in resolving various issues that there are clearly some special interests around the table. And obviously there's, as Kathy, you said, there's so many ways to slice it up. But in the end, what can we accomplish? We might say, oh, Bowen needs to have, more ramps or an elevator, but what are the actual realities of achieving any of these goals?
I think we can speak to that. That part of it is just identifying barriers, but we don't need to necessarily fix them.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think some of it would be like if the plan is the first step, and then it's almost like then the committee could say, okay, in our work plan, we've got a plan, it's adopted. The work plan is, we want to now develop the standards for trails or whatever, this is the first thing we'll do is like then delve into this item that's identified.
Or these are the things that don't cost that much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like these are some easy ones to do first, impact, and these are longer term.
Or ones that we have control over.
Yeah.
So we can identify in the plan, we were speaking of the ferries but those aren't necessarily achievable. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Peter and Robin.
Yes, Peter.
The other thing I did read the act when it, probably a year ago when I first became aware of it. I think the idea is that this is a living document, and we're not going to come up with a plan that stands there for the next 20 years and that's the go-to thing. I mean, I would be very much in favor of, let's get something to start getting things down. If we come up with what's inevitably going to be an imperfect document, we can acknowledge that and say there may be things we didn't even think of addressing. There are things we may want to go into more detail with later, develop and allow for a plan that might be updated. Not necessarily the way that the OCP goes through a formal update and consultation process, but rather something that we can update on the run.
But that is actually.
It is much more than the OCP.
It is intended to be
It's in the
renewed
legislation,
and to
yeah.
be
It has to be updated, I think it's every 3 years, but then our council decided it was going to be every year based on the
Okay, well,
recommendations.
that's
so
important to know. So the
Yeah.
plan we are preparing
Pressure's off.
is for 1 year.
Well, reviewed and updated doesn't have to be rewritten.
Right, but it's like, you know, so the intention is, this is the plan for what could happen in the next year. Is that right?
I feel like it would be a 10-year plan, but that we would just be revisiting it every year. Like I'm seeing it like the budget, like it's a 5-year plan,
5-year plan.
but every year you,
There's like, and this is kind of more detailed for
Yeah.
the immediate time period. But knowing the time period, I think does change.
okay.
You know, what could you achieve in a year? And what could you achieve in 10 years is a very different way of looking at it.
But that's like a work plan, isn't it, what you choose
Yeah.
here?
Well, it is, that's what I'm imagining this plan is a work plan.
I would have thought that, I mean, we're advising council, we might say, you know, these are things we think are important, these might be things we could start with first, but I would think council is going to decide about timeframes and, you know, they might refer it back to us and say, well, would you please develop some priorities or something, but I would have thought that the first thing is to present to council something they can chew over and then decide for themselves where they want to go first.
And I think that's all, makes a lot of sense, you know, that if they are working on, you know, something and they apply the accessibility lens to it, you know, if they're doing it next week, then that's when the lens has to be applied.
Right.
So they will have some timing of different projects. Did you want to talk about, you added this idea of the Snug Cove plan, so maybe that would
I think I could.
be a good context.
So Snug Cove has a development permit for form and character. So if you want to build a new building in Snug Cove, there are design guidelines that govern it. And we've had a project that's currently on hold but has been going to revise those guidelines. So the current ones date from the 1980s and the document's a little outdated and we've done work to revise it. But you know, that's the type of document that could include accessibility standards in the revised one. So it says like, you know, so some of the comments from the survey where it's like, all stairs should have ramps next to them. And that's like a guideline that could be in. So if you're gonna develop a property in Snug Cove and it has a staircase to access it, it should have a accessible ramp. It's more aimed, at least typically what we've done on Bowen, we regulate like the exterior of buildings and the exterior spaces, and we haven't traditionally regulated like the insides of buildings. But it's,
That's building code.
that's building, yeah, like building code has standards, but
All right, so that would, I'm just still looking at this list, so that would fit into physical obstacles that could be addressed by looking at that plan and seeing
yeah, and
what
so,
might be
you know,
adjusted.
maybe then it's like this plan would say, well, the Snug Cove design guidelines should reflect accessibility standards or some, you know, like that's what would be in this plan, would be saying like flagging that like this is the tool that we should.
And then you'd have to know how to update it and what standards you would relate to. That's the accessibility BCF. Yeah. So for example, you know, Stephanie at the beginning talked about the website. And I'm immediately sitting here thinking there are international standards about accessibility of websites. And you can evaluate any website to see if it complies. So that would be an external standard that if you wanted to say our website should be accessible, well, how would you know? You could say, well, we could compare to the international guidelines and see if we pass.
Yeah, I think we have those.
So
We
that
passed them,
is the
but-
kind of thing, or is there a standard that you would refer to? When you apply the accessibility lens to the Snug Cove plan, is it like, well, we comply with some externally created thing?
The grade of the ramp.
Yeah, short answer would be yes. I don't know off the top of my head.
So that's some research we
Yeah.
do. Well, let's take Peter's suggestion and play with some examples and see where that gets us for a little bit?
Sure.
Is that good for you? Are you good, Ron? Okay, so go ahead.
Okay.
Kick off with
So I'll just kick off. I've been interested in the multi-use pathway, partly because my dad was the 92-year-old who was there on the electric scooter at our community thing. And I came with them, went with them to buy the scooter, and then the multi-use pathway had just been paved all the way up the hill. And so the very next day, so after he drove off the ferry, from riding in the front of the ferry, like with the wind in his hair and the big trucks on either side, it was hilarious. He drove off in front of them and drove home. Basically, I was puffing to keep up with him. And then the very next day, he drove up the new multi-use pathway up to Artisan Square for a massage thing or some appointment that he had. And anyway, I just had been interested in our multi-use pathway and how it's not just a bike trail. And what do you do when you're a rural area and you have a village that has the design standards and things are closer together and maybe a higher accessibility needs? And then you also have a rural character island. And I just wanted to share with people that I found this sustainable access for a thriving future. This is from the city of Auckland in New Zealand. And it's the city that I think is the most similar to us because it has a lot of rural areas and it's very car dependent. And it's just something I found that's out there that relates to transit that you were talking about. And it relates to multi-use pathways and accessibility by bicycle and walking and all these inexpensive things that you don't have to be dependent on a car. And it includes things like car co-ops and things like that. Anyway, it was just interesting and I thought some people might like to see it and help us distinguish between standards for the Cove might be different than standards outside of the Cove. I know the OCP has different categories. So the Cove is one category and then there's near Cove, I forget what it's called, village periphery area. And then there's the rest of the island. So maybe that's a tool over there that we could look at, people that are interested in could look at for how could we make all these transportation things work in these different zones?
So I think I like that. I think that's great, but I think it also is another example of, if we identify a problem area, how can we measure? So what you're giving is a comparison. We can say, compared to this ideal, realistic example that has a guideline, how do we compare? And where is there possibility of some movement? Measuring things is good. I would imagine that eventually you're going to have to say, we identified this problem, we used this standard, we weren't meeting, we weren't passing, and then we did this and now we passed. That is kind of an accountability approach that some bureaucrat would like and the public would like.
I think it would also
Evaluating.
Yeah, like it kind of have a standard. So another, just to kick off an example like that, there was so much about trails and beaches. And is that in your bailiwick too?
It's in the parks plan.
There's a parks plan. Okay.
We have lots of plans.
In the masters of planning.
So is there anything about accessibility in the parks plan?
There must be. You're the.
So we should check this.
I'll look it up, and a couple of my action items, I can look in the OCP and the parks plan and pull out some of those things that relate to accessibility and bring them to the next meeting, if you would think that would be valuable.
I think that would be great.
Okay.
So we have, just for the notes, this example that Danielle gave about the Snug Cove
design
plan.
guidelines.
Yeah. So we can check that out and we can see if there's a yardstick to use. And we have Sue Ellen's example of the multi-use trails and the Auckland yardstick we can use. And now there's a parks guideline.
It just existed now.
That we can look at and see what it actually says already. But if we wanted to address some of the issues that people raised about trails and beach access, I was a member of a group that was led by some engineers at Toronto Rehab, and they had funding from the Canadian Federal Accessibility implementation. And they did a big study about accessibility in the national parks in Canada. And that is now released. So, you know, how do you get a wheelchair onto a beach? How do you, so all of these, you know, paths in the forest and everything that's in a Canadian national park, they have created the accessibility guidelines for. And I don't think our beaches and trails are that different. So we don't have to reinvent the solutions. We can use their guideline and kind of say, how does ours compare? And what could we do that would get us closer to what they recommend?
So I'm just gonna say, I have to run to an event at the BIC, so.
Danielle.
I'm going to give you a heads up that I need to leave at 5:45 also.
Okay.
Well, that sounds great. And if I can just say, I've been on the Parks and Trails Committee for forever. And I'd be happy to help with that part as well. And I have a couple of ideas for places we could make accessible on Bowen. And but I won't go into the details now because I think we're.
Yeah, and I imagine we can, you know, it's like start with this one, it's the low hanging fruit, and then go from there. Is this kind of what you had in mind, Peter?
Yeah, no, it's good, yeah. If I could say, I mean, speaking as someone who in the last few years has become much less mobile, I've stopped going to a lot of places. And not even because I don't know whether I could get there or not, or know that it's just that I suspect I go on memory, For example, take a couple of beaches, Tunstall Bay Beach. I mean, I live in Tunstall Bay. I haven't been out of the beach in quite a few years. Because from memory, the access just wouldn't really work for me. But it might be a good idea for us to say, we're not going to make every beach wheelchair access. That's not going to be possible. But we might be able to say certain places, this is a type A path.
Yes.
This is a path that someone in a wheelchair can access, and they know that the slope is not going to be too steep and it's particular wideness, and it's, I'm sure, as you said, there are standards. And then there are going to be other beaches which have a rough track going down, and certain people just won't be able to get down there. But by saying, if we can say, there's a certain standard for access to major places, we can then start looking, well, do we want to make this beach type A access?
Yes.
What are our priorities here? And the other thing, of course, is that if you just take Killarney Lake, a lot of it's very easy to get around, and then suddenly it's not. And again, I remember that very well. I used to walk around there a lot. But it might be good for visitors, newcomers, and people to know, and even for people like me who might not know how things have changed, that this is a type A access for 1.5 kilometers. And then it stops, and then it's a type C.
So just to kind of pull out for the notes, one of the things I think we need to capture is, even if we change things, it would have to be communicated. So people would understand what their choices were.
Yeah.
Because if you don't tell people, they won't know.
I have an example.
Access, yeah.
I have an example, and that's, I believe it's Bowen Bay Beach. got a railing this year. Yeah, this summer sometime, and we didn't have an easy way to get the word out. About that change. The library got a button that you can push and the door automatically opens. And there wasn't a way to communicate that to the folks who might be most interested. I think you put it in the newsletter and that kind of thing, but it's not, unless you're on it. So maybe that'll be something this committee might be interested in at some point.
Yeah, and I think also, well, just to kind of throw out ideas. So in terms of the businesses, you want to advocate and, if we had some, report card of, is your business accessible? You could give them a sticker that they are,
Public shaming.
an A+ business for accessibility, and they could use that in their advertising. So I think, yes, it's the getting the information out so people know, and also helping people to understand what the targets are if it's other people who are undertaking these changes, like businesses on the advocacy side. So I heard.
Is that her hand? This one?
Okay, sorry.
Christina.
I'm just thinking, the survey results that are on the agenda there, they're long, and each question is answered individually, which is great. You can read it, but I've just been trying to go through and list the barriers that are listed. And I'm only on number 16 out of 90. And I've already got a long list with, 4 times that, 3 times that. I think it would be really helpful if we could look at that data and truly review it and say, what are the barriers that are outlined? Because we've gone to this trouble of asking the public to respond and to tell us what they see as the barriers. So we could start with that. What have the public who've responded, which, yes, less than 100 people, but it's still, they took the time. It would be great to just have a list of how many times did someone say beach access? How many times did someone say access to a store? How many times did they say the ferry is the problem? And at least then we would have a list that, in both those documents about how to create your plan, it says your first step is identify the barriers, or one of the first steps is identify the barriers to accessibility. And then you can start writing your plan. You can decide which of those barriers are we going to prioritize, because inevitably you can't do them all in 3 years, and you'll want to revise the plan and go back and say, yeah, tick, tick, done, let's add 2 more. But I think it would be, for me, really helpful to just say, what are the things and what categories do they fall into? And that could really start to just inform an initial plan.
Yeah, what we did for the national parks exercise, it became a matrix, and there were different, is it swimming? Is it camping? Is it, different activities? And then the other side was different disabilities. So some of those comments also talk about hearing, or they talk about mobility, or there are different issues. So I think that could happen. I don't mind doing that, or
Yay!
you want to do it.
Hooray!
I'll go in this room saying things like that.
If you have it in some sort of,
It's in your inbox.
but do you not have this?
Just sent it to you
Oh, okay.
as an Excel spreadsheet.
Thank you. Perfect.
Then I think it will turn out that there are things like trails and what we talked about, beaches and transportation. And then there'll also be people who said, hearing is an issue, or mobility is an issue, or
I think
cognition, I think, came up also sometimes.
we could just sort of categorize them and sort of go, okay, how many times?
So this is kind of the map
Do they
that
go
then we
into a
can dig
category?
into. And then I think we can look for what are the yardsticks that we can use to set targets. So I heard Sue Ellen volunteer for the parks topic and for the pathways topic.
I have Sue Ellen going through all the legislation, finding the accessibility points. Is that too much?
What I volunteered to do for my action items would be to pull out accessibility specific mentions in the official community plan, unless people wants to do that. And in the parks plan, And I'm going to circulate these Auckland guidelines. And did I volunteer for something else?
That's fine. Does anyone want to do another plan? So if Sue Ellen's doing OC, official community plan and parks plan, someone want to do transportation plan?
I just, in the beginning of this, I was thinking, similar to what Tina is suggesting is, we've got all this raw data from the surveys. I think a place to start is themes within different topics. And then from there, maybe research could be, delegated depending on the theme. And, like if it's for Sue Ellen around policy within, OCP or whatever, and then yourself or other
So what's an
committee
example
members.
of a theme?
Theme would be transportation.
And then there could be a sub-theme of
Sub-theme
ferry and a
of-
sub-theme of parking or.
Taxi service, handy dart, I don't know,
I think I heard our chair.
because that, I think you can draw it from the raw data. So if you have the theme transportation, and then, subsections of
Okay,
that.
so the theme, that example of a theme would kind of map onto the list of transportation was one of the items on the list that Steph put on the screen.
And I think the other important part of
I think it's on both.
doing the themes is you want this to be Bowen specific. You want to draw from the raw data we have. And even the research could be,
I have a
draw
sneaking feeling too that
different-
these themes will have some relationship to other committees and activities that the community is
Definitely.
involved in.
Yeah.
I have a feeling there may be some way of mapping those things. Yeah, Peter.
I'm feeling very conscious that, as I have one type of disability, but I really, I have very little understanding of a lot of the disabilities that all sorts of other people have. And everybody's disabilities are different. I mean, completely. And I mean, they have things in common. And, I can only draw on my own experience, and then things change as well. I mean, I have a progressive disease, so it's always changing for me. So I think this is going to be a big learning process. If I start talking about access to beaches, my perspective is, mobility. But as you said, that there are other kind of accessibility things that I may not have given any thought to.
So that's kind of the other dimension that I think will come with a matrix if Tina wanted to look at that. Some things will be mobility, some things will be hearing, and some things will be seeing. We have people who are blind and deafblind on the island who have, very clear needs that they've articulated. So, and then, cognition and, there will be different types of disability that come out of the survey, and we probably don't need to do every single one in the Encyclopedia Britannica, but we can do the ones that come up in the survey, that people have identified.
I think that also any anxiety that may be experienced about missing anything can be placated by the knowledge that everyone will trash our work. And that's such a great thing. So if we just put something down,
No,
the
so you
council will
forgot
send
me.
it, they'll send it to all the committees, and the committees will say, you forgot this, you forgot this, you forgot this, you forgot this.
Right.
They'll be like, thanks for doing our work for us. And then we'll put it, and then it'll go to the community, and they'll say, you forgot this, you forgot this, you forgot this, that can go in. And that's the work. So
The other thing, I'm just gonna say it before I forget, is, so for example, like if we sliced it by disability, I'm sure Alex would have lots to say about, best practices for vision accessibility. provide some information about best practices for hearing accessibility. And my colleague I'm in the gerontology department at Simon Fraser as an adjunct, so I'm not on their payroll. But the guy who is the chair of gerontology at Simon Fraser has a big project, which is very well funded, that he does with the city of Vancouver and the city of Burnaby and New West. And now he's also started doing this with Vernon. And I asked him if he would want to do it on Bowen, and he was interested. And what his work is, he calls it Demscape, and it's dementia. It's basically how to make, he does built environment and urban planning for people with dementia. And then he would have students, we'd already talked about how to get funding for students to come and, do an evaluation of Bowen using their guidance on, is it dementia friendly? So, so we could do vision, we could do hearing, we could do, dementia as a particular kind of set of cognitive and other issues. Mobility is huge. So we could do it. We could, we can find standards for, beach access, but we can also find standards according to disability. So once we have that matrix, I think we can kind of get the knowledge to know how to propose solutions. So Swillam laid out her actions. What would you like to do, Peter?
Well, Susan, you mentioned the OCP. I'm very happy to go through
Oh,
it.
good.
And, probably won't read every word in the OCP, but I will go through and pick out things that seem to be relevant to what we're trying to do.
Okay, so Peter's doing OCP and Councillor Fass is doing the Parks Plan.
I'll do Parks Plan and I'll do the Snug Cove Design Guidelines then
I
instead.
think I need to get you something.
A draft, the latest draft.
I know, so it's not the one that.
It's 90% done, so it's just like the perfect timing. I
Can
can
you
probably find
look
it.
at both? Can you do both? The one that actually has been adopted and the new draft?
Yeah, okay. Okay, as long as Peter's doing the OCP, I can.
Yeah, okay. So Parks Plan and the two versions of the Snug Cove
Yeah.
Design Lines.
Is it fair to ask you, Steph? So all these documents that we have links to,
Yeah, I'm sent, yep.
are they kind of in a drive someplace where we have a common place where we put resources, or how do we share these
So
things?
as a local government, our firewall is so, we can't share with people much other than, but email, but I can post most things on our accessibility page that I showed at the beginning of the meeting, our
As if they're
committee
public
page.
documents
Yeah,
anyway,
just stick them
then,
up under resources.
so we can all see them and everybody else can see them too.
Yeah,
That would be
okay,
great.
that's my action.
And Tina had a plan to
Do I?
analyze the survey
Do I?
data. I'm
Oh, I thought
asking
you was doing that, Kathy.
I can do
quantify
that.
data
I
from
can
the
do that.
survey into-
too. Yeah,
Okay,
one of the,
I might be able to get a staff member to help.
I mean, I'm happy to look at broad categories, but I'm in budget crunch mode, so
No,
it's gonna be a couple of
happy.
weeks.
I think
I'm
Kathy's gonna do it.
I'm happy to
She's
do that.
gonna do it.
I mean, I kind of have that
Great.
in my head anyway.
That's great.
Was there something, Angus, that you were interested in?
Any theme you're interested in?
Thinking about the Snug Cove guideline,
Okay,
Okay.
design guideline.
I'll run my, how about if I come up with some draft list and I'll run it past you? That'd be good? Okay,
Okay, I'll put both names on that one then.
all right.
Perfect.
Okay. Did you have anything, Robin, that you would like to take on at this point?
Social inclusion, maybe?
So that could be, so if we're reviewing plans, we do have an equity, diversity and inclusion
Yeah,
policy.
right.
So,
Maybe I apology, I don't know where that policy is.
Well,
Tina, excuse me, sorry.
go ahead.
Tina, does the library have its own or does the library use the municipal?
API?
Yeah.
We are just rewriting, we're just about to pass our version, which is but it's based entirely on the munis.
Okay.
Just changing where it says council to board
Right,
and
okay. So
CAO to library director.
Same as what we're doing here. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure there wasn't another one.
So is EDI and accessibility separate?
Right now they are.
I don't think it is supposed to be.
Well, that's a question.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we need to understand where our job starts and stops. So some people put it together and some people don't.
So the legislation seems vaguely encompassing. I feel that because we have done some work in EDI, then it would be fair to focus on disabilities.
Okay.
But I'd be careful with that. We do have some,
So were you thinking of, understanding the connections? I don't remember who raised that. Was it Tina or Sue Ellen? Who asked about EDI? Oh, you did. Robin did. Okay, well, do you want to then look at the EDI and see, if there are complementarities or intersections? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Because then we can know, okay, it's over there in that document. We don't have to put it in ours, or it's a handshake and they go together somehow.
Referred to.
Yeah, the other thing where do you live on Bowen? In the Cove, okay, so that's easy. So maybe you could think about, and we could talk about this together, but it's since you've been in education, there's knowledge and training, and, you can't just, the engineers can build things, but to change people's knowledge and attitudes, how would we do education and raise awareness? Maybe you can think about that. Because I think some of these documents that flash before us also talked about social, and that was in the survey too. Social, if people don't understand what to do, it doesn't really help. Okay, so everybody has something to do.
I've got an idea for Janet. Would you mind reviewing the transportation plan and seeing where there's accessibility mentioned in there, since you were talking about?
Reviewing the transportation
I'll send
plan
it
for
to you.
Bowen, yes. Sure.
Yeah,
To see how it relates to,
where there's mention of
Accessibility.
well, transportation on Bowen consists of TransLink, correct? And that's pretty much it.
But the plan will speak to like possible goals or barriers. So maybe, what's the idea? You go through and pull out parts of the plan.
Does that have ferry?
Pardon me? Well, true, transportation would include ferry, but whatever we do here, ferries.
Well, it could be like an advocacy thing or a kind of informational. One of the things that struck me in the surveys was, which I really hadn't thought about, is, there's parking, including disabled parking and drop off for people who are then going to walk onto the ferry. But, if you had a mobility problem, actually getting from where the parking is
Exactly.
to the ferry and then not having a place to sit that is appropriate kind of makes that short distance of that pathway from the parking area to the ferry is an obstacle.
Or if you have to, if the ferries aren't operating and you need to get there, your options are water taxi. And if you already have mobility issues, getting on and off of a water taxi.
So maybe sort out also, like what of the transportation issues and in relation to the ferry or not, but even in relation to the ferry, maybe there are some things that could improve access on the land side, even if, yeah. Okay, that's great. So I think we have a lot of, and I will
Quantify
get
the
the,
data to themes.
yes, I will do the chart, the matrix, at least a first pass at it to discuss. And I will get the national parks information.
Oh, good.
And the Demscape is a guideline, so I can find that resource and we can have, you know, guest presentations if we want to. I'm also thinking, you know, once we get to, and then how do we proceed? You know, there's kind of like an inventory sort of a work that I would imagine has to be done. So like what Peter was saying, you know, this beach, you know, is a class A accessibility beach, and this is a B and this is a C, but who is going to go around and evaluate them and rate them? So we would need to think about how that gets done. Yep.
We, speaking as the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee, we've done a bunch of that work. We've got a beach inventory that was last done, I think, in 2020. So it has the rough data. But we also, I was just looking at the website and they're divided into community beaches. So the big ones, Sandy Beach, Castle Bay and Bowen. And they have slightly different standards for the neighborhood beaches and that kind of thing. And we could always set up a little working group and go around on one weekend or something.
All right, so maybe while people are working on their topics, think about, you know, are we going to need to go out and, you know, gather information in order to kind of put some meat on the bone once we get there. And somebody mentioned this, maybe those guys mentioned the cove, the village periphery and the rest of the island, our areas. But what came up in our meeting in the summer is the idea of neighborhoods. And that there was actually a fair bit of discussion in the summer about different neighborhoods. And I guess there are these NERPs. And so if you're a person with a disability, you know, the NERPs is another kind of a beast where, you know, if there was an earthquake or something, you know, the organization within the neighborhoods should understand what the issues could be for people with different disabilities, if there were evacuations or if there were emergency things or if people needed help. Yep.
Is our role sort of in terms of that interacting with other committees or other areas, it's our role to sort of bring recommendations to council, like within a plan that says, we recommend that you direct staff to interact with NERPs to make sure that NERPs has a plan within there, because it's way beyond our scope to manage all of these other entities. Am I correct in that we're sort of making recommendations that then council can enact or not enact depending upon priorities?
Yeah, I don't think we can actually do anything.
No, or even go and talk to NERPs and say, you should do this or that, right? That's has to come from council or somewhere else or staff.
But I think that's another, yeah, exactly. But I think that's, you know, like, you know, how many people on Bowen have a hearing loss? How many people have a vision loss? How many people have dementia? How many people have mobility devices? Like, I don't know if anybody knows that.
I think there's the caring circle and the health society that's building the medical center. They've done a lot of that kind of work, and there may be some there. I don't know, you folks would know better, but I thought there was, had been some work done.
I asked Colleen recently if she had any idea how many people on Bowen had dementia, and she did not know. And she was going to try to find out, but she never got back to me. So I'm not sure. So this is part of the communication problem too. Like, you can put on the website for a tourist, this beach is, an A accessibility beach. But the problem with people with disabilities is they don't know about this meeting. They didn't come to the event in July. I've spoken to a few of them and it's like, there's reasons why they can't participate. But if you knew, I mean, I guess they would have to want to be communicated with and consulted. So Peter said, well, he has his personal experience of, going to different beaches. But I would kind of wonder how we tap into people. But I think the NERPs really need to know if they're doing their job, who it is that needs help.
And similarly, I think there's a lot of unfound data in terms of people who are living not necessarily off the grid, but definitely off transportation accessibility, who may, once their spouse dies, who was the driver, then they can't even get to the health center. I see that as a big issue that is very much unknown until they say, oh, I can't live on Bowen anymore, and they go to Manitoba to live with their grown children.
Right. Anyway, that is a big topic, but do you have any suggestions about?
Oh, I do. I was gonna, sorry, Robin, but just that review process I spoke to. So if you're talking about being able to get the feedback from people with disabilities who are not participating, I think that we could really push that review process. So if there was a rough draft that's maybe gone through some committee review, and then we could find, instead of forcing people to fill in a survey, it might be a little bit more like use our connections and use like physically door to door to say like, do you need me to support to review this document, and what is missing for you personally in that public engagement piece?
Peter?
Can I suggest that at some point we ask for input from various people at one of our meetings? Like, I'm thinking like the bus drivers who know a lot, and the firemen, and the ambulance people.
Yes.
And the
service providers.
Yeah, Colleen O'Neill, people like that, who would have a much better sense, or at least of, that have their own particular perspective on things. And I think just having them at a meeting where we can discuss things like the way we are now would be quite beneficial.
That sounds.
They were all invited to the community session that we had.
Okay, well, if we asked them to a specific meeting, I mean, and I'm sure we get some of them.
Yeah. So that's an idea, just to keep track of. The other thing I heard, one of our friends, the neighbors, is a bus driver on a school bus. And he knows all kinds of things about buses. I don't know, because all the drivers hang out together. Yeah. And apparently there was a trial that was conducted of a bus that would pick people up.
Yep.
And apparently
about
it
5
was,
years ago.
what he tells me is it was very well used. So
that's back in play.
So is that data?
I can send you that report as well.
Something that would be useful to us?
Yeah, they did a final report. Councillor Faskin can correct my facts, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
So, and so the Transportation Advisory Committee has recently asked council to follow up on that, because the end report says we're gonna do it again and never did, so.
Oh, there was a poster up on Ferry that I noticed several weeks ago. And I thought, that was 5 years ago. So they are going to do it again.
I think council's gonna remind them that they had said that they would.
Oh.
So I think it's part of a larger conversation.
But in terms of, who's out there and who would use it?
That's the
apparently there
big
is a
unknown.
demand and it was useful.
I
Maybe
can send the report.
that's another source.
Yes, I was just asking Peter King about that a couple of days ago, if he knew anything about the results of that. He didn't know.
Okay, so we have, thank you. So I think we have some things to do.
Can I just,
Sure.
part of what Tina was asking about as well, isn't this the whole, in terms of the plan that they're developing, is the idea, isn't it the idea that we, start with the focus on some of the themes from the research, translate that eventually into a plan, which could include community engagement, could include
It has to include
research, along the way. So then we draft the plan that goes to, as mentioned, this is all linked. That plan or the draft would go to committees. Is that the?
That's generally what happens, yeah.
Generally what happens. And then during that process, other ideas will be put into the plan, ideally. And then isn't more, after that process, more community engagement around
It would be public comment.
developing, say, the ultimate plan from the draft. So I'm just looking at the general steps of this process of developing a plan. And,
That's what we did with the economic development plan. and
That's the
that-
kind of thing that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes a draft will be formally adopted by council, right? At some point, it has to be, it can't just go back and forth to the community. And, but then, every time council wants to spend money on something, or council decides not to spend money on something, the public can weigh in at any time. And the advisory committee can too, because we're just gonna be ongoing, right? And then it's gotta be reviewed every year and lots of opportunities, I think.
So I will look at that Whistler plan just to see what it looks like. But I'm imagining the plan is not necessarily very long. That it's a plan,
It's
it's
larger
not
than we
like,
want it to
it's
be,
not
yeah.
like the entire end of the work. It's the,
But I
what
think
are
it's
we
an
gonna do?
action plan too, like that, we want to identify barriers. But like, I don't think that we should be constrained by only talk about things we can fix, because then we're not really acknowledging or validating
Yeah,
the challenges that are there to people with
Yeah.
disabilities. So I guess there's different approaches
So I don't-
within.
no, anyway, to what Robin was saying, like, we don't have to solve everything. We just have to say, how are we going to spend our time?
Approach.
And we don't have a new deadline for the, what are we going to do is a little different than, and then what do we do for the rest of the year? So is it possible to kind of tackle some outline of a plan next time?
I think so. And when Councillor Jurgensen and I were talking about meeting, his idea was to meet every 2 weeks, back when we had a deadline, was to meet every 2 weeks up to the deadline, and then every couple of months, like maybe 4 times a year after that. We don't have a deadline of 2 weeks is too often, but we've got some hot action items,
It's
so
kind of
maybe,
yesterday, right?
yeah, maybe jump on. Are people able to meet in a couple of weeks, do you think? Yep.
Yeah.
Or 3 or something?
Did you have something to add, Peter?
And, well, not adding really, but I was just going to ask, you've given us each things we're going to do. Are we going to just bring them back to the next meeting or circulate them amongst, or send them to the chair or?
I think sending to the group, the AAC at bimbc.ca,
Okay,
which is basically reply to anything I've sent you to the group,
right.
reply all. These are, I think, the timeline for action items are generally the next meeting, but it's helpful to get people information sooner rather than later, so that it doesn't come in a clump, and it probably inspires each other if you do your action.
Yeah.
So we just need to email the one email address.
Yep.
Even if we have everybody's, the one email address goes automatically to everybody on that.
Everybody and Steph,
Yeah.
so
okay.
she can put it in the agenda if the chair is looking for it or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about the 18th of October?
Date.
I'm looking at that.
It's a
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
That's 2 weeks, or we could do the 25th as
I'm
a,
gonna ask for the 25th. I've got a few that week.
yeah, okay.
I am not here on the 25th.
Well, we could do the 18th.
18th is good.
I've got, the Joint Management Committee, 3:30 to 5:30 on the 18th.
Yeah, no, that won't.
Is it 4 o'clock the good time for people? Or can we do the mornings? Is anybody free in the morning? No, okay. Not yet, they
Depends
are.
on the day. 4 o'clock is probably better.
What, at 4 o'clock on Thursday, the 19th?
I can do that,
That's good for me.
Okay?
okay?
Oh. What about Tuesday?
Okay.
That would be better.
Okay, the 17th,
The 17th?
Tuesday? 4
Tuesday the
o'clock,
17th.
yeah, would that work?
That work?
This time. We come back on the ferry. We work still. Afternoon, but we made it to this one.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
So
On the
that's,
17th?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
send a, invite.
and that one, you know, I guess if people needed to, it could.
I have tentative things that it's hard to know.
Okay.
17.
Do you have access to the results of that transit experiment?
Yes, I've got an action to send it to you.
Would that be?
Yeah.
Send that out. Staff send the pilot on-demand bus service report, yeah.
And is there a separate transportation committee that potentially is duplicating much of what I would be looking into?
The Transportation Advisory Committee would be familiar with some of your things that you'd be looking into, but I don't think they have done this particular project.
Not the accessibility side.
Yeah,
They probably looked at the plan, but more for getting people around.
and there are a lot of new members on a lot of hot topics right now, so
On transportation.
you're probably doing good work, yeah. Nice good overview work.
With a leaning towards seniors or
No.
just in general?
In general, including the people who have to get to work and the people who have to get to medical appointments. You know, they've got different sort of hot topics that come up right now. I think they're all about the ferry, but
CRC.
you know, if you would like to, you can look at their agendas and see what they've been looking at lately.
Okay.
So Steph can show you where those are, and then that's a good way to kind of get a quick overview of what they're up to.
Okay.
And whether they've done some work that you don't have to do, or whether they've looked at the seniors or the, right. That's what I would do, yeah.
Can you give, Janet and me an action to talk about seniors?
Sure.
You have the Sky connection and that's a bit of a mystery to me. And I don't know if they're they would definitely have some opinions about this. Maybe we can harness and, but maybe we need to look also at the people who aren't participating. Okay, that sounds like a lot of work, but I think if we kind of think about this and look at all these great documents that Steph has put in our resource list, when we come back next time, maybe we can try to make a simple plan.
Sure.
That kind of checks the box, and then we can have more fun digging into the
Okay.
actual details.
And you guys you're fine to come to this room?
I think so.
Good. And it was, everybody could hear okay? And the CO2 was okay? And, okay, good. Well, and we can move chairs around or whatever people need, so. Thanks, everybody. That's a great start to the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Lots of work.
Yeah.
But worthwhile, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, that's great.
I know what I have one last question for you.
Oh.
I have one last question. This new building that is being built,
Community center?
what has been done in terms of accessibility? Building?
I would not be expert on that. I'm going to suggest
Let's
there's
ask the planner.
accessibility code. Yeah, there would be to code. It's a major budget, so it's a lot of the exciting accessibility features if they were beyond code.
So is that a document that we could have access to, or is it a talk to somebody?
Maybe
kind of
talk
a
to
thing?
someone. We may be able to have someone come and talk.
Are you thinking about the actual building schematics, the plan? And I know that there is going to be a drop-off area right at the door. That was one of the inquiries that
There's a
member
ramp
of
too.
Sky brought up,
So there are,
like handicap parking.
yeah, that would be one thing. You know, architects typically totally ignore acoustics.
I was just gonna say
And
that.
acoustics is something it's so cheap to do it during construction, and it is so expensive to do it afterwards.
May I suggest that the next agenda, we see if the planner, whichever. Jillian, or somebody can come and speak to us about that? Because I think there's been quite a bit of work done on the acoustics of some of the spaces. For example, the big drama, multi-use one with the seats that pull out for
Large
music.
multi-purpose room.
Yeah, and but I'm not sure about the other spaces. And maybe Jillian could come and just give us a 20 minutes with some slides and show us around that way.
I'm gonna throw a dart and say we've had so many complaints about this room that people have paid attention to that room. But we'll ask Jillian.
I think Councillor Getty brought that up, about acoustics in here.
Sure, there are members of council who have various issues, right? And some of them come and go, right? And but in terms of your specific question, when we're finished with this room, we will be meeting down there. And what's the space gonna be like and what's it gonna be like for everybody? And
Well, it's just seems like a golden opportunity to get it right
yeah,
before it's already finished.
Well, it's well underway, so I think I mean, I'd imagine that there's been a fair bit of attention given to these things, but we should at least ask.
Yeah.
And if it was possible to get someone to come speak to us at the next meeting, even if it's just some reassurance, would be very good.
I'll ask.
Yeah.
That's my action.
And if it is already well designed with those ideas, then that will be a great example, to lead the advocacy. Because otherwise it's going to be discouraging.
very good. I gotta go,
Yep.
but
Everybody.
yeah,